In this section of the communication training, I'm going to apply how to talk to people when you're talking to somebody from advertising. Typically these days it's online, but sometimes people still do newspaper ads and other advertising mediums. Now the first thing you need to remember as I go into this, the script will have assumptions on what type of advertising you do. So basically, if you're using a website, you'll want to reference the website in the script. If you have a newspaper ad, you want to use something that will definitely jog the person's memory as to what they responded to. If somebody leaves a voicemail with you or sends you an email off of some form of advertisement, you obviously want to reference that. So one of the things I'm trying to get you to understand is success in talking to people that come from advertising is connecting that ad to you calling them. Because sometimes people just don't remember right away. They usually will remember you. So the key is when you're talking to them to actually reference what you're calling about, relate it to what they responded to, and then actually have them have a little bit of time, that first little 10-second window to pull up their memories on what they did, because a lot of people, it takes some time to actually understand, okay, what is this person calling about? And once they do, it makes the conversation go a lot better. Otherwise, if you continue on in the process, you've got somebody who's thinking about, who am I still talking to? And as you're talking, they're still trying to figure it out. And obviously they're not paying attention to you or what you're talking about. So you want to make sure you make that connection. So anyways, what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump into actually what a script would be. And since this is an ad-focused training that is supplemental to the overall communication training, what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to cover everything up to connecting to the person. And then from develop on, I'm not going to cover it because the scripts in the overall communication training are enough. Basically what we're doing there is doing the same process for everyone. The only thing that changes up front between, say, an offline relationship and an advertisement is really the connection and how that conversation goes. So I'm going to start with that connect step and carry you through that, and then I'm going to give you scenarios on voicemails to leave if you get voicemails, what to do. I'm even going to give you voicemail frequencies, how often you call until you get a hold of them. A lot of times people ask me, how many times do I call somebody? When do I call them? All those things I'm going to cover. So this will be a pretty simple training, but it's pretty in-depth as far as what you need to do. So this is something you don't want to gloss over. You want to pay attention because this is based on years of experience. In my own network marketing company, I am one of the best, if not the best, at sponsoring people in the AdSense setting, particularly online. So I've sponsored a lot of people that way. So actually over 100 in my company. So and these are on $500 to $1,000 packages. So I know what I'm doing. I know this stuff works. It's just something you have to know, make a part of you, and practice. So basically what you're looking at here is kind of I think of it in my mind as a flow chart, even though it's not a flow chart, but I'd recommend as I go through this and you look at this, even when we give supplemental materials with PDF files and scripts, which we will provide as a part of this, I would actually flow chart this out on a piece of paper so you have an understanding of where this is going. You want to know where you're going in a conversation. It's kind of like drawing little Y's in the road because there's a lot of different scenarios, yes, no situations that can make or break your conversation. So where I'm starting here is if somebody answers the phone, and this is a real subtle thing that I learned over the years, and I found it really worked well. So if you have somebody that is of the same gender as the name, so obviously if Jason is the prospect, like my name, and a male answers the phone, especially in this day and age of cell phones, most people are purely cell phone. I assume that's who I'm talking to. And so what I do is I'll say, Jason, question mark, and then I shut up. and then they'll respond yes or no. And the reason why I do this is I find if you engage people right away, typically it makes the person feel like, okay, this is somebody that's obviously supposed to be calling me because they're addressing me by my name and they're assuming that I'm who I am. And so it kind of gives you an edge right off the bat with the person you're talking to. So that's why I do that. Now, if it's a no, then what I say is, I say, okay, my name is Jason Wells and I'm getting back to Jason. I'm just wondering, is Jason available? And so you notice I'm not following the script exactly. I'm kind of making it my own. But the point is you're trying to get to the person and you're trying to get past the gatekeeper, if you will, if you don't get them on the phone. Now, this has been less and less of an issue over the years since cell phones have become more prevalent. When somebody does answer, a lot of the time it's the person, and that's why the original step is what I do. If somebody says no, they're not available, basically what I do is I just say, and this is important, the way you say this, like this really matters. It's not a kind of I'm going to try this and make it my own and do something else. I say, would you take a message for him or her? In my case, if it's Jason, would you take a message for him? For some reason, when you say that, I find you have a much higher rate of people actually taking a message. I tell them who I am, what I'm calling about in reference to Jason inquired on some information from me and as promised, I'm just getting back to him. So, and I just leave it at that. And so the people typically will be helpful if you put it that way. So now if the person says yes, or somebody else puts them on the phone, you want to proceed to the opening, I call it. The opening is really where you get the conversation going and you connect you calling them to the ad that they responded to. So I'll say something like, hi, my name is Jason Wells, and you fill out a form on my website, www.yoursite.com, or it could be you responded to my ad and you could state the title of the ad. Maybe you ran a newspaper ad. The point is, as I said at the beginning, what's key here is you've got to relate what jogs their memory the most. And you might test this. Maybe your website domain doesn't jog their memory. Maybe it's something on the website that tends to connect with people. I can't give you advice on this because everybody's form of marketing is different. But once you lay out what your marketing is and you test what you think is going to most jog their memory or connect you to that ad, that's what you want to run. Because what I find in these types of situations is once you find something that works, you're just going to go with it and you're going to repeat it over and over and over again. So anyways, I'm going to say, hi, my name is Jason Wells, and you would fill out a form on my website at www.yoursite.com, and I just wanted to get back to you on that. Now the key here is I pause, and as I said at the beginning, I give them a chance to remember who I am. And sometimes this is an uncomfortable silence. So if it's been really long, and sometimes, 5 seconds seems like a long time, but it really isn't. Give them 5 to 10 seconds to think about it. If it's really been 5 to 10 seconds, they still haven't said anything, normally they'll say something. They'll say something like, I'm not sure. I remember doing something, but I don't remember what. And so then you have to kind of refresh their memory, help them out. So what I do is, again, I start spouting off some of the things that the ad or the website or whatever it is you do that tends to jog their memory. And as I said earlier, when you get really good at finding out the thing that jogs their memory right up front when you do the opening, you'll have less and less of this problem as far as them remembering you. But sometimes it takes several things to mention. You were requesting information on this, and my website had this page on it, and you may have read this, and there's actually a video, and I was the guy in the video who I was young, and and I have glasses, and a lot of people, "Oh, yeah, okay, yeah, I remember who you are." So basically you want to do things like that. And I talk real matter of fact, like I'm talking to you right now, because that's what makes people feel comfortable. I don't try to sound all like tough and like I'm Mr. Professional, tough guy. That stuff just doesn't work, I find. You know, you just want to talk to somebody like you've known them for a long time, and just make them feel at ease, because they're going to open up to you a lot faster. So if they do remember, or you have to refresh their memory, once they remember, I go to the initial conversation. Now, the initial conversation is I say, okay, the purpose of my call is to provide information on whatever that is. So if it's an ad or website, on my website. But before we get into that, I just wanted to get some details on you and how you came across my website ad, whatever it is. And I want to find out what eventually motivated you to respond. Now here, you want to pause and give them a chance to speak. Now, several things can happen here. One, they can just out of the chute start talking. If you remember personality types in the prior training, a lot of times blue personalities, they'll just talk your ear off here. You won't even have to do anything. This will be easy. They'll open right up to you. Reds can be kind of withholding. They'll talk a little bit more, but they'll hold some stuff back, and you'll need to dig a little bit. Greens will be very reserved, and you may have to ask this question 4 different ways. You may have to even say to them, hey, I need to know a little bit about you in order for me to help you. You know, is there a better time for us to talk? Is there some reason why you're not letting me know a little bit more? I'm just real candid with people. If I'm not getting something out of them, I just ask them, hey, what's going on here? Because, you know, I want to provide some information to you, but I need to know a little bit about you. I need to know who I'm working with here. And so you have to kind of talk through this stuff. You have to work with them. The point is, you got to get them to open up, and you got to get them to tell you why they were motivated to respond. Now, if you're having a continued problem with getting people to open up, particularly with all personality types, or if 2 of the 4, like say greens and yellows, you're still having a really hard time with them, you need to take the Asking Questions course that we've had in this communication training, because you may be not really getting beneath the surface. Because the key is, when you're talking to somebody and they answer what motivated you, they're probably going to give you a 1 or 2 sentence response, but where the gold is in what they say. So they're going to say something, and you really want to pay attention to what they're saying, and you want to ask clarifying questions. And you've probably seen in some of the other training, the magic happens when you get to the 3rd or 4th clarifying question, typically. And so this question in the initial conversation part of the Connect, I find this is just a warm-up. This is just to get them talking. But the skills come from you asking questions and listening and paying attention to what they're saying. Don't get off in la-la land when they're talking, or because you're nervous, you're more focused on the fact that you're nervous and you're not paying attention to what they're saying. Now, I understand this is going to take time, but I want you to differentiate between you having trouble with this because you're nervous and not paying attention, as opposed to this not working for you for some other reason. You may know how to ask questions, but your problem is your mind is someplace else because you're nervous, and you're thinking about that, and you're really not listening to them. Well, I don't care how great you are at asking questions. If you're nervous and you're not paying attention to what they're saying, you're not going to know what to ask. So just be aware of this. Be aware of when you have trouble in this process, what's causing it. As you get good at this, this will be like second nature to you. And I'll tell you, it just takes time, it takes practice. And basically what we're trying to work towards is basically, why are they talking to you? So the goal is the why. And I'm sure if you've been around network marketing, multi-level marketing, MLM, whatever you want to call it, everyone always talks about the why. Well, this is no different. I mean, it's kind of a cliche word to use, but it fits. And basically what you're trying to do with this initial conversation in the connect step is you're trying to figure out, why are they even talking to you? And their why is typically, I don't get to see my family, I want to spend more time with my kids, I'm tired of my boss, I'm sick of my commute. If it's a product focus, it might be some, they may have some illness, maybe they have some problem, because I'm in a nutrition company, so I'm focused on that. If you're selling some service, they may have responded to some ad for some need on what you have. So the point is, you need to get to the bottom of what's going to drive them through this process. What's going to motivate them to cruise through it? Because if you don't get to that, sometimes what happens is when they get stuck at various parts of the communication process, sometimes you need to remind them and why they're doing all this. So that's one of the big things that we're trying to do here in this process, is get to that. And that's why I do that initial conversation. That's why I set that script up for you, so you can move in that direction and use your asking question skills to get to that. Now, this just takes practice. If you just learn this stuff and you go through this training multiple times, eventually you'll know what to do, and you'll just need to go out and practice it. And then a lot of it's learned by trial and error, just doing it. Because I can give you 50,000 different scenarios, and it's probably not going to fit the next call that you make. Okay, so once you get to that why, you are going to continue with the communication process just like you normally would. So in the communication training, where we talked about the overall process, we talked about the develop step, the introduce step, the follow-up step, and the close step. So you need to apply the appropriate process that you're doing. So the question is, in this conversation, how much does the person know? You're standing on that side of the Mississippi River with your contact. And on the other side is your company, product, or service. How are you going to get to the other side? Or are you already there? Are you going to go straight to introducing your company, product, or service? Or are you going to develop them? Maybe the website or ad that you put out there that they responded to, maybe that's already in a sense developing them. Maybe that's already happened. Or maybe it's started to develop them, and maybe you need to continue to develop them. Again, we have to leave this up to you, your prospecting methods and how you do things, how your team does things, your company does things. At the end of the day, you've got to fit this into our process. But the bottom line is, if you don't have something like this, you need to start creating a develop step like they talk about in the communication training, because from this point on, this is a very delicate process. You need to develop them and then introduce your company, product, or service. And then as normal, you're going to go to the follow-up and to the close. Okay, so now let's go back to the beginning, and you're picking up the phone and you're wondering, okay, Jason, what do I do if I get a voicemail? Okay, and this is where the whole I don't really know what to say. I don't know how often to call. If I got a voicemail on the first day that I called, when do I call the next time, and how many times do I call? Okay, if you're pre-introduce, before introduce, you're going to make 3 phone calls before you move on from this person. 3 phone calls. The frequency is going to be day 1, day 2, and day 4. So just to give you a heads up on this, if it takes you, say, 2 calls to get them to connect with you, that you may have to do that. If you have to send them some information to continue to develop them before you introduce, it resets the process and you have 3 more calls again. So you have to think about that. You have to be aware of that. And that's something I'm going to talk about at the end. How do you manage all this, and what do you do, and how does this all work? And I'll give you some suggestions on that. But basically, if you're looking at this here, you can see that step 1 is leave the voicemail, and I say, hi, my name is Jason Wells. You had filled out a form on my website. I tell them the website. Again, do whatever you find works in connecting them to your ad or to your website or whatever it is you're doing. I just wanted to get back to you on that. Give me a call back at your number. Again, that's your number. You repeat it a second time. I'll also send you an email confirming this call. Step 2 is I send them a text message and I say, hi so-and-so, I just left you a message. Let me know when there's a good time to get in touch with you, and I leave my name. Now, you might go, well, how do I know whether I have a cell phone? These days, almost 8 out of 10 times, it's getting to be 90% of the time you're talking to a cell phone. So I just send a text message. Heck, if it bounces, it'll bounce. If you're texting a home phone, it'll come back and say this isn't a cell phone. Big deal. So most people nowadays have unlimited texting plans, and so this is what I recommend you do. You're just touching the person more. The more you touch them, you know, pretty much the better you'll do at getting in touch with them. Now, one other thing I want to say, I get a lot of complaints with new associates in my own team. They'll say things like, man, all I get is voicemails. How am I ever going to build my business? I will tell you right now, I built my business on voicemails. The more voicemails you leave, the more business you're going to have. The reality is these days, a lot of people just don't pick up the phone. And so you have to call sometimes multiple times to get them. And sometimes you're actually carrying on conversations these days in voicemail. Whatever. Just do what you can to get them connected to you. It happens. So now, on day 2, the message is about the same. I don't change a whole lot. I just let them know that I have called once before. And just in case you didn't get the message, I just wanted to let you know I did follow through. So doing the same message, you can see the slight variation here. I'm just altering it slightly, and I'm letting them know that, hey, I called before, and I'm just doing my job here. I'm just following through like I promised. I'm doing my thing here, and I'm just here to help. So on day 4, I call them one last time, and usually this message is different. I kind of get a little more aggressive is not the word. Aggressive may be a good word to use with most people, but aggressive for me is pretty strong. I would just say I get a little more firm with people. I just say, hey, I've called you a couple of times and I haven't heard back. Ball's in your court. When you decide to take the time to talk about your inquiry, give me a call. I give them a number, give it to them a second time, and then I text them and I just let them know that I've left a couple of messages without a response. I let them know the ball's in their court, and I leave my name. So you're just kind of being a little tougher with them and letting them know, hey, I'm being a professional here. I've done my part. You haven't called me back, and I'm kind of subtly calling you on that. And you got to do that sometimes. You know, I'll tell you, you may tick some people off sometimes, and you have to find the right balance of how tough you are in your tone and the way you leave the message, because a lot of that matters. You may have to play with it. I would rather have an occasional person calling me back upset that I was maybe a little rude or came across a little too tough, because I find if I'm not pushing the envelope just a little bit, I'm not going to get the good people to call me back and say, hey, you know, I'm really sorry. You're right. You did call me a couple times. Usually the jerks are the ones that are going to give you a hard time about being a little rough with them. And you know what? You don't want them in your business anyway, so I don't concern myself too much with that. So what do you do when you've moved into the introduce, follow up, and close? Well, again, if it takes a few phone calls to get them back on the phone on a follow-up after you provided them introduction information, you know, you'll reset that when you get a hold of them. So if you're following up and it takes, let's say it takes 3 or 4 calls to get them back on the phone. That happens, it's just the way it is. People are busy. So you do that, and then you move towards the close or another follow-up, just depends on what happens in that conversation, and that resets the calls. And again, in this situation, the frequency, you're really doing 5 calls, day 1, 2, 4, 7, and 14. So you're calling them pretty heavily up front from the day that you're supposed to follow up with them. So day 1 starts from the day that you agreed to follow up. So that could be the next day or a week from then. And then the second day runs from that first call, 4th day, a week later from that follow-up date, and then 2 weeks later from that follow-up date. This tends to work really well because if you happen to catch somebody in a busy time after they talk to you, maybe they didn't foresee things being busy, so things picked up. You give them a little space after that third call, give them a lot of space after the fourth call. They'll appreciate it. And I can tell you, don't be weird about following up this much. People just are funny. Sometimes they need you to call them 4 or 5 times before they get back to you. I've had some of my best associates, my best signups, call me back on that 5th call after I sent them some information. And a lot of them signed up on the spot. So just don't forget that. So basically what I do on the post-introduce, this is kind of a common sense thing, and you can really modify this however you like, whatever fits you. But I say something like, I'm just following up on the information I introduced to you the other day. Give me a call back at my number. Again, that's my number. And then I text them and let them know that, hey, when's a good time to catch up? We had an appointment, whatever. The point is you just keep hitting them with it. You let them know. And as each day happens, if you have to go to day 2, 4, 7, and 14, if you have to give 5 calls, just alter the voicemails a little bit. Use your common sense. Whatever your gut tells you to say, if you feel something that you need to say, if you're feeling kind of like they're jerking you around, say that. Say it in a nice way. Just follow your gut, follow your intuition. Just make sure your messages are a little bit different. And let them know that you called them. Let them know that on day 1, that was an appointment call because it was a follow-up and you did keep the appointment. You're wondering where they're at. This is one of those things you got to use your common sense. Now, finally, what I want to talk about is contact managers. And, a lot of people say to me, Jason, how am I going to keep track if I've got like 50 contacts in my system and, some are in the pre-introduce, some are in the post-introduce. How do I keep track of what day they're on and all that stuff? That's the thing that's the nightmare. And one of the other problems is a lot of people don't even know what email to send. I always send an email confirming my call if I leave a voicemail, even with the text. And so what you have to do is you have to figure out a process that you can use and your downline can use. You have to have something where you have maybe a document you send out where you have the voicemails that you're going to leave, how it's relevant to your company and your opportunity or your product or your service. You need to have that laid out. You need to tell them when to call. You can use my method, day 1, 2, 4, or post-introduce, day 1, 2, 4, 7, and 14. So they know you got to lay all this stuff out. Otherwise, you're going to get a million phone calls. And then you're going to have to find some sort of contact manager that allows you to keep track of all that. And, people that are in my team, we have our own proprietary custom-built system that we actually built that does all this automatically. So and I bring this up because maybe there are those types of things out there that you can find. But what we did is we made something so if a downline of mine starts calling in an online or offline setting, they call on day 1. Once they fill out their notes, send out the email, the system does all that. So we can keep track of the conversation. We could keep track of any email they send in their note file. We have all of our contacts in there. And then it takes them off the list. And basically, they just call down the list until their list is empty. And then when they open their computer the next day, whatever contacts are available, those contacts pop up. So if you called, say, 10 people on day 1, those same 10 people are going to come up on day 2. If you call those 10 people on day 2, they're not going to come up until day 4. So we built all this because I got tired of fielding phone calls. Jason, what email do I send? When do I call this person the next time? All those kind of things. So this is something, as you become a leader in MLM, that you're going to have to consider, because you may find a way to organize all your contacts and do all this stuff, but then you have to teach people that same stuff. And I found it to be very chaotic. So that's actually why we built our own system. So just food for thought, something to think about in the future. You need to be aware of what's coming and as you build a team. And so that's what we did. I'm sure there's probably some solutions out there that you can find that can do that for you, hopefully. Otherwise, maybe you can just figure out something like, I know there's programs like ACT and Salesforce and stuff like that. So, yeah. So anyways, that should help you with online contacts, contacts from advertising. This is basically what I do. It's not that hard. It's just integrating it into the existing communication training that we have. The communication process doesn't change. It's just how we connect with people is different because we don't know them.